This Pennywise Recaps, and today we're reviewing the action drama Blitz. Get ready for incredible plot twists. The film begins with a brief introduction to Operation Blitz, a massive bombing campaign against the United Kingdom that began in September 1940. 125,000 people were evacuated from the bombed cities to safe regions. Fires rage in London after the bombing. Firefighters fight the flames while German aircraft continue to drop bombs on the capital. Because of the alarm, a little boy, George, along with his mother Rita and grandfather, runs to the air raid shelter at night, along with other citizens. However, the guards refuse to let people in, causing chaos. Eventually, the guards break their orders and allow the civilians to hide in the empty subway. Once they get down, they settle down for the night, taking with them the cat George brought from home. The next day, Rita decides to send George to a safe village against his wishes. As a memento, she gives him a pendant given by his father. The grandfather escorts the boy out of the house, meeting his neighbor Jack, a policeman, on the way. Rita takes George through the streets of London, where the boy looks at the balloons hanging in the sky and the anti-aircraft guns on the streets. At the train station, they go to the cars where they are boarding the evacuation trains. The mother hangs a ticket around George's neck. Upset about the forced trip, the boy shouts that he hates her and runs away, hiding in the crowd. His worried mother finds him sitting in the carriage. However, the offended George doesn't even look at her as the train pulls away. Depressed by the separation, Rita goes to the factory where she works on making ammunition for the front. Her colleagues try to support her morally until her boss orders her to stop talking and get back to work. The rest of the day is spent working hard, resulting in a batch of aircraft bombs. At the end of the shift, musicians come to the shop and set up equipment for a live radio broadcast. As part of a program to keep the nation's morale up, the factories broadcast performances by talented workers on the radio. Rita is honored to represent her home plant. She dedicates a song to her son and to the parents who were separated from their children by the evacuation. Her performance ends with a chant from the workers demanding that the subway be opened to be used as a bomb shelter. Meanwhile, in the locomotive, two boys pick on George. However, he demonstrates his character by offering them a fight. The boys are frightened by the prospect, and George is then plunged into sad memories. Once upon a time, children in London teased him for being different from them. When the conductor gets off, George decides to escape. He goes to the door of the carriage, opens the window and then the door itself, then throws his suitcase out and jumps off the train. As he slides down, the boy waves to the departing train and walks home. A passing train catches up with him. George leaves his suitcase, taking only his food, and climbs into a freight car. Inside, there are already 3 similarly resourceful boys. George shares a sandwich with them, telling them that he is returning home. His new friends warn him that if he is caught, he will not be able to escape a second time because they will be watching him. The brothers offer George to climb onto the roof of the car through the hatch. He agrees without any problems, and they take turns following him, enjoying the ride. Bystanders wave at the children. Tired, the boys go to bed. When they wake up, they hear that the train is on the London line. Workers are checking the cars for strangers. The boys manage to escape from an old man who almost catches one of them. George freezes in fear of the approaching locomotive, but his friend encourages him. But another tractor, which no one notices, hits the boy, and he dies in front of the brothers and George. The brothers run off to one side, and the stunned George rushes straight to the station, where he climbs onto a departing bus. At the factory, after the broadcast, the management calls the activists to their office for an impromptu broadcast. Returning home after her shift, Rita recalls how she once danced with Marcus, George's father. It was then that he presented her with a family heirloom, his mother's pendant, which she later passed on to her son. On their way home at night, the couple encounters some ordinary workers who, following the old traditions, start laughing at Marcus, and it ends in a fight that is stopped by the police who come running. In the end, Marcus is arrested on charges of assault, ignoring Rita's testimony. On the bus, George asks the conductor how to get to the church. The woman explains where and how to change buses. The boy gets off at the next stop to find the right way. A display case with a toy railroad catches his eye until a policeman waves him away. George continues his journey on foot. When he gets to the shopping center, he sees stained glass windows telling the story of Britain's greatness. A policeman finds him there and takes him to the police station. He asks where George lives and finds out that it is in another part of the city. The policeman takes the boy with him, promising to take him home afterwards. Meanwhile, Rita and her co-workers go on vacation to drink and have fun. They try to attract the attention of some of the soldiers and sailors who have been given leave, but Rita is not in the mood for romantic adventures. When her friend brings a sailor to the table, Rita goes home. On her way, she comes across a socialist meeting where Mickey, a supporter of Christianity and communism, is speaking. He is collecting donations to support a shelter for the destitute. Rita tells Mickey that she wants to become a volunteer to help the wounded and needy. Her first task is to provide moral support to a little girl whose mother was killed in the bombing. On her rounds, George tells a policeman that she has never seen her father because he was deported before the boy was born. Noticing a light in the window, the policeman knocks on the door to ask the owner to turn off the electricity. A blackout order is in effect in London to prevent the enemy from providing landmarks. Soon, an air raid warning sounds. The policeman and George run to the nearest shelter, where many people have already gathered. The policeman takes George inside. The shelter is equipped with beds and a dining room. A conflict is brewing among the gathered citizens because they are separating the native British from the newcomers. A policeman intervenes to stop the conflict and reminds them that their enemy also divides people into right and wrong. He then puts George to bed, promising to come back for him in the morning after his shift. As he falls asleep, the boy remembers his mother and grandfather teaching him to play the piano. In the morning, George is woken up and invited to his hiding place by the children. There, he overhears the adults talking about how his new friend died during the night trying to save an old woman, but he didn't have time to get to the shelter before the bombing started. The boy hides from the police and runs away to the ruined city where there are fires everywhere, sown by enemy aircraft. Rita goes to work through the streets that have turned into ruins overnight. One of the brick walls almost falls on her, but her neighbor Jack saves her. Before she has time to start work properly, her bosses call her into the office to tell her the bad news. George did not reach his destination. All that is known is that he jumped out of the train and ran away. The stunned woman blames the people responsible for the evacuation for her son's disappearance. She leaves her workplace to find George in the city, despite the discontent of her bosses. The boy himself wanders around London, looking into shop windows. He is noticed by a girl named Jess, who treats him to some candy. Then she offers to feed him a normal meal. Jess brings the boy to the billiard room, where she hands him over to Albert. Albert immediately decides to use George for illicit enrichment. He orders the boy to crawl through a hole in the wall to a jewelry store and rob it. George tries to escape, but he is caught and clearly hints that his next attempt will be his last. The boy sneaks through a narrow gap into the bombed-out building. As he gathers his jewelry, the police burst through the door. They move a wardrobe to close the hole in the wall and prevent further entry. The police are about to leave, but notice that some items are missing from the display case after the bombing. Realizing that he is about to be caught, George knocks out a stick, causing a collapse of debris. But even this does not stop one of the police officers who wants to check the room. Only the second collapse makes him change his mind. The policemen leave, leaving George alone to carry the loot to his accomplices. George asks to be taken home, but this provokes an outburst of anger in Albert. He beats the boy and then starts punching himself in the face until one of his accomplices calms him down. Albert orders Jess to keep an eye on the boy and treat him to a cake as a reward. Rita, having reached home and warned her father, goes in search of her son. First, she turns to her neighbor Jack, and together they go to the train station to start from there. However, no one has seen or knows anything. The unsuccessful search is interrupted by another air raid alarm. Even people who were spending time in the restaurant heard it. Hearing the signal, they do not have time to hide, and the building is bombed. Albert's team collects valuable items. George is among them. He does not want to touch the lifeless bodies, but he is forced to. Not far away, a rival gang is engaged in a similarly immoral business. They mock the rich. George seizes the moment and runs away. Once on the waterfront, he watches enemy planes dropping bombs and fires. When an explosion comes too close, the frightened boy runs across the bridge, but is nearly killed by a downed plane that crashes nearby. George makes his way through the chaotic and fire-ravaged streets of London. Firefighters are trying to minimize the damage, and people are panicking. Finally, he reaches the entrance to the subway. Going downstairs, he finds other children watching a performance of a homemade puppet theater. Going further, the boy comes across police officers who are trying unsuccessfully to drive people out of the station. George then goes down to the rails, lies down between them, and covers himself with something like a blanket to get some sleep. Meanwhile, Rita is worried about her son. She is joined by Jack, who is skeptical of her socialist views. George wakes up and starts walking through the subway tunnel. He reaches the next station, where a crowd is listening to a female trio sing. Here, George sees the same policeman friend, but it turns out to be just a dream. He wakes up and sees water on the floor. Suddenly, a stream of water breaks through the station wall. The station is flooded, and the panicked crowd presses toward the exit, pushing the boy into the water. George runs to the stairs, but water pours down from there as well, washing him away. The lights go out, adding to the panic the fear of the dark. By the light of flashlights, people try to get out. George gets to the grate that the men are pulling apart to let people out. The little boy is instructed to crawl through and open the passage. He dives in, but gets stuck. Rita returns home and checks the rooms. Her father is sleeping with the cat, and her son's room is empty. She looks sadly out the window, not knowing that a new squadron of enemy bombers is flying in right now. George wakes up in bed. The landlady says that he saved many people by calling for help. She promises to feed him and take him home. Putting on his lucky pendant, the boy hears the police knocking on the door. Not wanting to fall into the hands of the law, he escapes through the window. On the familiar streets, he smiles happily as he makes his way home. However, his home, which was bombed, is now in ruins. Only the cat survived. Among the rubble, the boy sees his dead grandfather. He calls out to him, but in vain. Suddenly, George hears his mother's voice. She embraces him, not believing in happiness, and promises never to part with him again. Thank you for being with us. Subscribe to the channel, like us, and be sure to click on the bell to stay up to date with our new videos.